At exactly 10:14 a.m., the registrar looked at me over his thin glasses and said gently, "Miss Laurent, if the groom does not arrive within 5 minutes, we will have to cancel." 5 minutes. 7 years of loving Ryan Foster reduced to 5 final minutes of waiting in a government office that smelled like paper and disinfectant. I stood there alone. No parents behind me, no relatives adjusting my dress. I was an orphan long before this day, but I had built my heart around Ryan. My phone vibrated. I already knew. "I'm sorry, Sofia, Ryan's message read. Scarlett isn't okay. She had a breakdown. I can't leave her alone. You understand. We'll reschedule." Reschedule. Because Scarlett Hayes needed him. The registrar cleared his throat again. "Shall I cancel, Miss Laurent?" he asked kindly. Before I could respond, a calm male voice behind me said, "He isn't coming." I turned slowly. A tall man in a dark suit stood a few feet away. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't judging. He looked like someone who had already calculated the outcome. "I'm sorry," I said. "He isn't coming," the man repeated evenly. "My bride didn't show up either." I stared at him. "That doesn't mean we solve it together." He held my gaze without flinching. "Marry me instead," he said. For a second I thought I misheard him. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Yes." "Why would you even suggest that?" I demanded. He stepped a little closer but kept his tone measured. "Because I don't intend to go through dating again," he said. "I don't have the patience for pretending, performing, impressing, or discovering 6 months later that someone is not who they claimed to be." I blinked. "That's your reason?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "You were just abandoned in public. You understand betrayal. People who understand it rarely repeat it." His words hit somewhere quiet inside me. "You assume I won't cheat?" I asked cautiously. He tilted his head slightly and said almost dryly, "I will definitely satisfy you. Don't I look handsome?" I blinked and said, "But you just got ghosted." For the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted. "And so did you," he said. He was hinting that if someone as beautiful as I was could be ghosted, then, of course, he could be too. Then, unexpectedly, we both laughed. It was not loud or dramatic, but it broke the tension. Two strangers standing in a civil office, both abandoned within the same hour, laughing at the absurdity of it. When the laughter faded, I looked at him more carefully. "What about your parents?" I asked. "You expect them to accept a woman you met 5 minutes ago?" Caleb shrugged lightly. "If you give them a grandchild one day, they will not object." I stared at him. "That is your comfort plan?" "It is practical," he replied. "They care about legacy, not romance." I studied him. He wasn't impulsive. He was strategic. And strangely enough, that steadiness calmed something inside me. My phone started ringing. "Ryan." The name glowed on my screen like a test. For the last couple of weeks, ever since that girl came into the picture, I had chosen understanding over pride. But there is a limit to endurance. I declined the call. "What's your name?" I asked the stranger. "Caleb Pierce," he said. The name carried weight, though I could not place it. "And you?" he asked. "Sofia Laurent," I replied. The registrar looked between us, visibly confused. "Are you both certain?" he asked. "Yes," I said. The registrar hesitated only a second before sliding the papers toward us. Caleb signed first. His signature was steady, controlled. Then I signed beside his name, Sofia Laurent. The stamp came down sharply, echoing louder than it should have. And just like that, I was no longer the abandoned bride. I was Mrs. Pierce. The car door closed with a quiet, expensive sound that felt far too final. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Caleb started the engine smoothly, as if driving away from a civil office with a stranger-turned-wife was a routine part of his afternoon. I watched his profile instead of the road. Calm, controlled, not impulsive. That unsettled me more than if he had looked nervous. Outside, the city moved as usual. Traffic lights changed. People crossed streets. Somewhere, someone was probably celebrating a wedding properly. Inside the car, I was replaying mine. I stared at my hands resting in my lap. A thin gold band now circled my finger. It felt unfamiliar, not heavy, not dramatic, just present. 7 years. I met Ryan Foster when I was 21. I was working 2 part-time jobs and studying on a scholarship. He used to bring me coffee during exam weeks and tell me I worked too hard. I believe that meant he cared. When Scarlet Haze started appearing more often in his life, I told myself I was being insecure. When he canceled dinners because she wasn't in a good place, I chose patience. When he started answering my questions with irritation, I chose silence. For the last couple of weeks, I had been choosing understanding. Now I was choosing something else. "Are you regretting it already?" Caleb asked suddenly, his eyes still on the road. His voice was calm but direct. "I don't regret decisions immediately," I replied. "I analyze them." That earned him the faintest hint of approval. "Good," he said. "You seem very composed for someone who just married a stranger." I added. "I don't make impulsive moves," he said. "I make calculated ones." "That didn't look calculated," I said quietly. "It was," he replied. "You needed dignity. I needed efficiency." I turned my head toward him. "Efficiency," I repeated. "I don't intend to waste years evaluating character again," he said. "You were just publicly abandoned. People who experience that rarely risk repeating it carelessly." His reasoning was disturbingly rational. "You speak about marriage like it's a merger," I said. "In many ways it is," Caleb replied. That should have offended me. Instead, it made sense. The car slowed. Large iron gates opened automatically as we approached. I frowned slightly. "Where are we going?" "Home," he answered. Security guards nodded as the car passed through. The driveway stretched longer than I expected. And then I saw the house. No, not a house. An estate. Modern architecture rising against the afternoon sky, glass and stone reflecting sunlight like something designed for magazines. My breath caught. "You live here?" I asked, unable to hide it. "Yes." I turned fully toward him now. "What exactly do you do, Caleb?" He glanced at me briefly before answering. "I'm the CEO of Pierce Global Holdings." The words settled slowly. "Pierce Global. My company. My employer." My stomach dropped. "You're that Caleb Pierce?" I asked. "Yes." For a moment I said nothing. Of all the reckless decisions I could have made today, marrying my CEO had not been on the list. The car stopped in front of the entrance. A uniformed staff member opened my door. "Welcome home, Mr. Pierce," he said respectfully. "Home." The word felt foreign. I stepped out slowly, looking at the estate again, and for the first time since signing the papers, I felt something beyond pride. Chub. Not because of the wealth, but because I had just changed my life in ways I did not yet understand. Caleb came to stand beside me. "You can still walk away," he said quietly. I looked at him. "And do what?" I asked. "Return to the office tomorrow and pretend nothing happened." His expression shifted slightly at that. "You work at Pierce Global," he said. "Yes," I replied. "The Strategic Finance Division." There was a brief pause. Well, Caleb said calmly, this just became very interesting. And somehow, despite everything, I almost smiled. By the time I changed and came downstairs for dinner, the shock had settled into something steadier. I had married my CEO. That sentence no longer stunned me. It grounded me. Dinner was served in a private dining room overlooking the garden. Everything about the house felt planned and controlled. Nothing was random. Caleb sat at the head of the table. "You've been quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," I replied. He nodded slightly. "About marrying your employer." "About marrying the man who approves my division's budget," I corrected. That made him pause. "You work in strategic finance," he said. "You've seen the European expansion proposal." "Yes." "And," he asked, "you're borrowing heavily in a market that isn't stable," I said calmly. "If interest rates rise, it could put pressure on your cash flow." He didn't interrupt. "You're expecting growth to balance the risk," I continued. "But that depends on everything going exactly as planned. Markets rarely behave that politely." Caleb set his fork down. "You're questioning my plan on our wedding day?" he asked. "You asked," I replied. "Marriage doesn't change numbers." There was a short silence. "You speak very directly," he said. "I prefer honesty over flattery." His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus. "You're not impressed by power," he said. "I'm impressed by performance," I answered. That was the moment something shifted. He stopped seeing me as the woman who needed an exit from humiliation. He began seeing me as someone who could stand beside him. Before he could respond, my phone vibrated. "Ryan," I answered. "I heard from someone at the registrar's office," Ryan said. "Is it true?" "Sofia, tell me this isn't real." "I heard from someone at the registrar's office," Ryan said. "Is it true?" "I did," I replied. "You don't even know him." "I knew you," I said calmly. That wasn't enough. There was silence. "You're doing this out of anger." "For the last couple of weeks I chose patience," I replied. "This isn't anger. It's clarity. You're making a mistake." "I already did," I said. "I just fixed it." I ended the call. When I looked up, Caleb was watching me. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "I'm done hesitating," I replied. He nodded once. "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll attend the executive strategy meeting." "That's above my level," I said. "You think at that level," he replied. I held his gaze. "If I'm there, it's because I earned it." "Of course," he said. And for the first time that evening I didn't feel like someone who had acted out of pride. I felt like someone who had stepped forward. Walking into Pierce Global the next morning felt different, not because the building had changed, but because I had. The marble floors were still polished to perfection, the reception desk still quiet and efficient, the corporate air still calm and controlled. But now I carried a secret that changed the way every step felt. I was married to the man whose name crowned the building. No one knew. Yet the executive strategy meeting began at 10. I took my seat as usual, though I could feel the subtle curiosity in the room. Word had already spread that I had been invited to the senior level session. Invitations at that level were not random. Caleb entered last. The room straightened instinctively. He acknowledged no one in particular, took his seat at the head of the table, and began reviewing the documents as if yesterday had been entirely ordinary. When the European expansion model came up, he closed the file and said evenly, "Laurent." "Not Sofia." "Not Mrs. Pierce." "Laurent." "Yes," I answered. "You had concerns about exposure. Explain." The room turned toward me. There was no special tone in his voice, no softness, no signal that I was anything more than a division lead being questioned. I stood and walked to the display screen. I outlined the vulnerabilities in the current structure, explaining how rising interest rates could strain liquidity and how alternative financing arrangements would provide more flexibility. I kept my tone calm, direct, and focused on numbers rather than authority. When I finished, there was a brief silence before one of the senior directors nodded slowly and said, "She's right." Caleb did not smile. He simply said, "Revise the proposal." That was it. No praise, no favoritism, just recognition. After the meeting ended and executives filtered out, I walked toward Caleb's desk and placed a small black box beside his tablet. He glanced at it briefly and asked, in the same steady tone he used during negotiations, "What is this?" "A wedding gift," I replied calmly. His eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, aware that two directors were still within earshot. "This is a workplace," he said quietly. "I'm aware," I answered. "Open it later." Then I left. A few minutes passed before he reached for the box. Two senior executives were still speaking near his desk about quarterly adjustments. Caleb opened the lid casually and froze. Inside was a pair of delicate black lace panties, folded neatly. For a single heartbeat, his mind went blank. Then he closed the box immediately. Too quickly. One of the directors glanced up. "Everything all right, sir?" "Yes," Caleb replied smoothly, setting the box aside. "Just a personal item." His voice remained controlled, but internally his thoughts were far less composed. This little demon. He adjusted his tie slightly, regaining focus. Marrying her had been calculated. Keeping up with her, however, was proving less predictable. An hour later, my phone vibrated with a message. "You're testing boundaries, Mrs. Pierce." I replied without hesitation. "I thought you respected bold decisions." He did not respond, but when I passed his office later, he was standing by the glass wall watching me. There was no irritation in his expression, only awareness. That evening, his parents arrived at the estate for dinner. His mother carried quiet authority, and his father spoke sparingly but observed carefully. The conversation remained formal at first, until his father asked what I did at the company. "I lead strategic finance," I said. "She challenged my expansion plan this morning," Caleb added calmly. "And was she correct?" his father asked. "Yes," Caleb replied without hesitation. There was a pause. "Not uncomfortable?" "Assassin." "She is not fragile," his mother said finally. Caleb looked at me rather than at her. "I know." For the first time since the civil office, I felt something steady settle inside me. Not pride, not survival. Something stronger. Respect. And once respect exists, everything else becomes possible. The evening after Caleb's parents left, the house felt quieter than usual. Not tense, just reflective. I was still thinking about his mother's words, "She is not fragile," when my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ryan. It was a news alert. I opened it without expectation. Then I stopped walking. The headline was neutral enough at first glance. "Pierce Global CEO marries senior executive in private civil ceremony." A photo accompanied it. Blurry, taken from outside the registrar's office. Caleb stepped slightly ahead of me. My face turned toward him. Someone had been watching. Caleb noticed my stillness. "What is it?" he asked. I handed him the phone. He read it silently. His expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his eyes. "It won't stay neutral," he said calmly. He was right. Within an hour, a second article appeared. This one carried a different tone. "Did strategic finance lead exploit CEO emotional vulnerability?" I let out a slow breath. There it was, the angle they were pushing. Not romance, Not a coincidence. Manipulation. They are framing it as if you were unstable, I said evenly. And as if you were opportunistic, Caleb replied. We didn't need to say their names. Scarlett Hayes knew how to control narratives. Ryan Foster knew how to play victim when convenient. They are working together, I said. Yes, Caleb answered without hesitation. My phone rang. Ryan, of course. I answered. Sofia, he began, his voice urgent but controlled. This is getting out of hand. You need to clarify that you weren't thinking straight. I was thinking very clearly, I replied. You don't even know what kind of pressure he was under, Ryan said. Scarlett was going through something serious. And I wasn't. I asked quietly. There was silence on his end. This looks bad for you, he tried again. People are saying you positioned yourself. I didn't position myself, I said. You removed yourself. I ended the call before he could continue. Khaled had heard enough to understand. We'll address it internally first, he said. The board will ask questions. I'll answer them, I replied. He studied me for a moment. You don't have to carry this alone. I'm not, I said. But I won't hide either. The next morning, Pierce Global felt different. Not openly hostile, but alert. Screens in the lobby displayed financial updates, and beneath them, scrolling headlines that now included speculation about my promotion timeline. In the executive boardroom, the directors were measured but direct. Was this relationship pre-existing? One asked carefully. No, Caleb answered. Did Sofia's position change after the marriage? Another asked. No, I said before Caleb could speak. My performance record and reporting structure remain documented. They asked about conflicts of interest, about optics, about governance. I answered each question calmly. Facts were easier than emotions. When the meeting ended, one of the older board members paused before leaving. Public perception is volatile, he said, but competence is measurable. He nodded at me once before stepping out. By afternoon, the media narrative grew louder. Scarlett gave a carefully worded statement about concern for Caleb's emotional state. Ryan posted something vague about betrayal and rushed decisions. It would have been almost impressive if it weren't so transparent. Then things shifted. Internal emails surfaced showing Scarlett had been negotiating a financial settlement weeks before the wedding. Messages from Ryan revealed attempts to reconnect only after the marriage news broke. The tone online began to change. People are quick to judge. They are quicker to pivot. That evening, after hours of calls and legal consultations, I found Caleb standing by the study window again, the city lights reflecting faintly in the glass. Regret it? He asked quietly. No, I said. Even now. Especially now, I replied. He turned toward me fully. They tried to paint you as calculating, he said. I am calculating, I answered calmly. Just not in the way they meant. For the first time that day, something close to a smile touched his expression. They underestimated you, he said. They underestimated us, I corrected. There was a pause between us, but it wasn't uncertain. It was solid. Outside, headlines would continue for another week. Speculation would cycle through outrage and fascination. Eventually, the world would move on to something else. But inside the house, inside the company, something had settled. This marriage had begun as a decision. It was becoming a partnership. And storms do not destroy strong foundations. They reveal them. We did not call another press conference, and we did not release emotional statements trying to defend ourselves. Caleb instructed the legal team to monitor the situation, but beyond that, we remained silent. No interviews, no explanations, no reactions. At first, the media found that frustrating. Articles speculated about power imbalance and ambition. Comment sections debated motives as if they had been present in that civil office. Scarlett appeared once more in a carefully staged interview, speaking about concern and emotional vulnerability. Ryan posted something vague about betrayal and rushed decisions. We did nothing. At the office, I continued working exactly as I had before. I'd attended meetings, challenged projections, and signed off on strategies that were backed by data rather than emotion. Caleb continued leading the company without visible distraction. When reporters attempted to question him outside the building, he simply said that Pierce Global's performance reports were public and that results spoke for themselves. He never mentioned our marriage. Weeks passed. The headlines grew smaller, then less frequent. Then they were replaced entirely. Because time does what arguments cannot. It observes quietly. It compares reality to rumor. And eventually it exposes exaggeration. At board meetings, no one questioned my presence anymore. The revised European financing structure performed exactly as predicted. Risk was balanced. Liquidity remained stable. Returns exceeded expectations. Performance, unlike gossip, compounds. At home, something steadier developed. There were no dramatic declarations of love and no sudden transformation into a fairy tale. Instead, there was consistency. He would leave files open on his desk, knowing I would review them before morning. I would adjust numbers and add notes in the margins, knowing he would read them before the next session. Dinner became routine rather than an obligation. One evening, as we stood on the balcony overlooking the garden, the air calm and cool around us, I realized that I no longer felt like someone who had reacted in pride. I felt aligned. "I miscalculated one thing," Caleb said quietly. "What was that?" I asked. "I thought this would be efficient," he said after a moment. I didn't expect it to be steady. I looked at him carefully. "And now?" "I prefer steady," he replied. The scandal ended not with apology or confrontation, but with indifference. Scarlett's interviews stopped when no one reacted. Ryan's posts faded when engagement dropped. Neither of them gained what they had intended to take. 2 years later, the estate sounded different. Softer, warmer. Small footsteps echoed down the hallway before a little girl ran toward us, her laughter filling the space effortlessly. Elise Pierce had my eyes and his composure. She gripped Caleb's hand with fierce certainty, as if she had already decided the world would cooperate with her. His parents visited often. They never mentioned the headlines again. Time had cleared everything without our defense. That night, after Elise fell asleep, we stood beside her crib in quiet stillness. "No regrets?" Caleb asked. I looked at our daughter, then at the man I had married in 5 reckless minutes. "No," I said, "because sometimes love does not begin with certainty. Sometimes it begins with humiliation, pride, and a decision made in a small government office that smells like paper and disinfectant. But when two people refuse to retreat, time does what arguments cannot. And time in the end chose us.